All right, so we're continuing our message series called The Story. So how many of you did your homework last week and read chapter? Look at that. The hands go up like, okay, let's get this over with. I want to tell them I did it, right? Very good. Awesome. Very good. So next week, your homework assignment is to read chapter 4. Write that in your notes. I did leave a blank at the bottom of your sermon notes where you can write that in, chapter 4, there in your sermon notes. So I want to clarify something about the books themselves. I did order some more this week, and we've got another case out there of like 16, so we've got some out there for sale. Now, I want to clarify just a couple things. One is we're not making money on these books, okay? I mean, and at this point, we're actually losing a little bit of money. At the beginning, I'd gotten them for $5 a piece from Lifeway. They've upped their price. If you go to Lifeway today, they're $20. So don't go to Lifeway, okay? Get it here for $5. I've been ordering them from Christian Book Distributors, CBD, for about $7 a book, I think is what it comes out to at this point. We're still selling them for $5 a piece. So I just want to let you know, we're not making money. We're actually, at this point, we're losing a little bit, but that's okay. That money that you turn in for that book goes right back into our church's account, and it's kind of a wash there. The second thing I want to make you aware of, if you don't have $5 to get a book, just take it. My philosophy is nobody in this room should be going without because you can't afford it or whatever. I know times are tough, but if you don't have $5, walk to the counter after church today, grab a book, wave goodbye, and take that book home and read it, okay? So I want everyone growing. We ought to be in this together and growing in Jesus Christ together, and I want us all on the same page, so make sure you get one of those books before you leave today. Hopefully, I'm sure we have plenty. All right, sound good? Everybody on the same page? All right, good. How many of you are familiar with the children's story series called Choose Your Own Adventure books? Anybody ever read those? How fun are those books? Now, for those of you who don't know what a children's Choose Your Own Adventure book is, let me tell you what they are. You get to read these books, and I love these as a kid. You get to read these books, and you start at page 1 in the book. And as you read along, you come to the end of a chapter or the end of a kind of a story line, and it has you choose which direction you want to go. As the main character, you get to choose the destiny or the adventure he or she gets to go on next. And it's really cool. So you get, if you choose to do one thing, it says, okay, turn to page 57, or if you choose another direction, turn to page 73. And so you go on this adventure, and you never just read the book cover to cover. You read it kind of as a choose your own adventure story. Wouldn't it be great if life was like that? Wouldn't it be great if you got to choose your own adventures and your own destinies and your own whatever in life, and you really got to just enjoy life as it was? Let me ask it this way. Wouldn't it be great if we could choose our own adventure to avoid the adversities, to avoid the miscomings that come in life, to avoid the disappointments and the shame that we go through? Wouldn't that be great? The sad thing is, we as adults know that's not how life works out, right? I mean, we go through troubles and tribulations and disappointments in life, and we grow up and we think our lives are going to go a certain direction. What did you want to be when you grew up? Tell your neighbor, what did you want to be when you grew up? Go ahead. Tell Dawn. Now, how many of you, raise your hand, how many of you grew up to be what you wanted to be? All right, a few, that's okay. And I got a laugh from somebody else because obviously that person didn't grow up to be what he wanted to be. We have in our minds a certain direction our life is going to go, and very seldom does it really go that direction. Am I right? We end up in places we just never thought we would be. I never thought, as a Kenmore person, I never thought I'd end up in Barberton. Sorry. Just never thought I'd be here. Sometimes life doesn't go the way you want it to go, but that's okay. I love it here. So in Genesis chapter 37, we find this boy named Joseph. He's a dreamer. He's a dreamer. Out of 12 brothers, Joseph is number 11. And we find as we read the story that he's his father's favorite. He is Jacob's favorite son, all right? Jacob loved this boy so much that he gave him this very ornate coat. You know as the coat of what? Many colors. So this would be like waking up Christmas morning, and let's say you've got 12 children. No, I'd never have that many. Let's say you have 12 children. Okay, you wake up Christmas morning, and you give 11 of them one of those paddles with a ball and string attached to it. You know what I'm talking about? Like this is a really cool toy, right? But one of them, the 12th one, you decide you give them an iPad mini. Oh, yeah. How bad would life be Christmas morning if that's what happened? And you can imagine what happened in Joseph's family, or Jacob's family. Genesis 37, verse 4. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of them, they hated him and could not speak a kind word to him. I think some of you know what that's like. Some of you grew up in families that didn't get along. There was a lot of hate there. And like Joseph, you saw the negative words being used and the criticisms and just the bad talk that went on in that family. And here's Joseph living in this dysfunctional family. And you talk about dysfunctional, this is real dysfunctional. Think about it. His mom lives there. His 3 stepmoms also live there. He's got all these half-brothers, half-sisters, and his dad. They all live in this one house. How many of you would want to live with your ex-husband or ex-wife? Anybody? Yeah, I didn't think I'd see any hands on that one. All right? But here's Joseph living in this dysfunctional family, and it's just negative and rude, and his brothers hate him, and it's not good. So like Joseph, like us at an early age, he has this dream. Only his dream takes his brother's anger to a whole new level, okay? It's not like he was dreaming of becoming like a fireman or a policeman or a cowboy, Nope, he was dreaming of something a little bit bigger. His dream was that one day his brothers and his father and mother would bow down to him, and that he would be ruler over them. That was his dream. So now you've got this coat of many colors. Then Joseph has this dream. Then he has a second dream, and now his brothers had had enough. Enough's enough. We got to do something about this. So one day, Daddy Jacob, he sends Joseph out to find his brothers into the fields. And his brothers had been out working all day long, and here they are. They're sweating. They're tired. They're hungry. And here comes Joseph, strolling out in his coat of many colors. Here I am. And what do his brothers do? Verse 19. Here comes that dreamer. They said to each other, "Come now, let's kill him. Let's throw him into one of these cisterns and say that a ferocious animal had devoured him. Then we'll see what comes of his dreams." And so Joseph's dream starts to become a nightmare for him. However, Reuben, gotta love Reuben, he's the oldest of the 12. Reuben comes to Joseph's rescue. In fact, Reuben has this plan. I'm gonna save Joseph. We'll leave him in there. When the brothers leave, I'm gonna pull Joseph out of the cistern and just bring him back home. That's Reuben's plan. So Reuben comes to the rescue. They decide not to kill him. Then Judah, at the end of their meal, they see this band of Ishmaelite people coming through, and Judah gets this idea: instead of killing him, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites into slavery. Might as well make it some money at this thing, right? So they sell Joseph into slavery to the Ishmaelites, and Joseph, at age 17, finds himself taken to a foreign land, Egypt, where he's sold again as a slave, and this time to one of Pharaoh's officials, a Mr. Potiphar, captain of Pharaoh's bodyguards. All right? Now, in the meantime, all this is happening. Joseph's brothers, they cover up what they've done. They kill this goat, and they soak the coat in the goat's blood. And upon seeing the blood-soaked coat, Daddy Jacob spirals into depression. He's upset his favorite son is dead. Now, back in Egypt, things are starting to look up a little bit for Joseph, okay? Now, after working for Potiphar for a little while, Joseph impresses him. And upon seeing this, Potiphar notices that Joseph is very gifted at leadership and at administration skills and coordinating things and management capabilities. So Potiphar puts Joseph in charge of his whole business. Essentially, Potiphar hands Joseph the keys and takes an early retirement. Doesn't have to worry about anything. Joseph's in charge. He can take care of it. No problem. Now, I like to think Joseph as a little bit like me, because in Genesis 39:6 we find a very key verse. The Bible calls Joseph well-built and handsome. Thank you. Here's where Joseph's story takes a turn for the worst, okay? It seems like a story out of one of those afternoon shows some of you watch out there. What are they called? Soap operas. Yes, thank you. All right, so here's Joseph. It takes a turn for the worst. It's like one of these soap operas. I mean, Hollywood couldn't write a script like this, all right? He's working around the house, and Mrs. Potiphar takes notice of this handsome, well-built man. And here things start to get a little R-rated. Mrs. Potiphar approaches Joseph, and she tells him, "Come to bed with me." That's the part that's R-rated. She didn't say it that way, and I can't say in this room what she really said. But in Hebrew, it's R-rated, trust me. He refuses, and that just seems to spur her on a little more. All right? Day after day, she approaches him, and day after day, Joseph refuses. So here's what I want you to notice about Joseph, and write this down in your notes. In the midst of his disappointment in life, think about where he's at. He's a slave in Egypt, away from his family. In the midst of these disappointments, from dreamer to slave, Joseph remains true to his faith. He remains true to his faith. How many of us can say the same thing? When life gets rough, sometimes it's easier for us to just throw in the towel. And we allow our disappointments to justify our disobedience. In this case, for Joseph, it's a sexual temptation. You know, you think about it, Joseph's not where he thought he would be in life. He's probably thinking, you know what? Why not? Life hasn't turned out the way I thought it would be. Why not? Besides, you know what? I could probably get away with it. It's not like Potiphar's around all the time. Why not? He's not going to show up. Why not? I heard a study done among Christian singles, and they asked Christian singles this question: what's the number one temptation you struggle with? 90% of them said sexual sin. They struggle with the temptation to sexually sin. You know what the other 10% struggle with? Lying. Come on, that's funny. Are you not tracking with me today? All right. But it's true. You know, you get into a situation, and because of where you are in life, it's so much easier for us to just throw in the towel and be done with it and say, who cares? Who cares? But not Joseph. Joseph remains faithful to God in the midst of these disappointments, in the midst of where he's at in life. It would have been so much easier for him to just say, okay, why not? But no, he remains true to his faith. But Mrs. Potiphar, we know, doesn't take no for an answer. So she pursues him, and for the last time, she asks Joseph to go to bed. He says no, but this time she grabs him by the coat, and Joseph slips out of it and runs away. Second time he's lost his coat. All right. So Mrs. Potiphar, she's left there with his coat, and she cries, rape. And all these people come in, security comes in, they do their quick investigation, and Mrs. Potiphar has Mr. Potiphar throw Joseph into jail. Joseph's life gets worse, from dreamer to slave to prisoner. How could it get any worse than this? And how many times do we get into life and we think it could get any worse than this? And then it does. And we think, where is God in the midst of this disappointment? And some of you are in a chapter in your life and you're going, man, I don't know if I can take anymore. And we cry out, and the nagging question in our head is, where is God? What do I do? And 3 times in chapter 39, we find out exactly where God is. Check this out, verse 2. Before Potiphar throws Joseph in jail, where's God? We find it in verse 2. The Lord was with Joseph. Verse 21, Joseph's in jail from the confines of prison. We find the Lord was with him. Verse 23, I repeat, the Lord was with Joseph. You're going through disappointments in life and you're wondering, where is God? It's simple. The Lord is with you. Tell your neighbor that right now. The Lord is with you. We need to be reminded from time to time the Lord is with you. And sometimes it's so difficult to understand that, man. We're going through this life and it's tough and we're struggling, we're disappointed, and we're like, okay, God, what's going on here? I don't understand. The Lord is with you. And we see Joseph's life, it starts to get a little better again from prison. The warden now sees great potential in Joseph, probably what Potiphar saw in Joseph, he sees in Joseph now, and he puts him in charge of the entire prison. All the prisoners are under Joseph's care now, and there are 2 particular prisoners that Joseph oversees, and one of them used to be a cupbearer to Pharaoh. He used to serve Pharaoh his wine. The other prisoner used to be the Pharaoh's chief baker. He used to bake the food for the Pharaoh. I don't know why they're in jail, but they're in jail. Both are out of a job. And both of them have dreams one night that really foreshadows their futures. Well, Joseph hears them talk and he says, hey, what's going on? And they tell Joseph their dreams. And Joseph listens to their dreams and he interprets their dreams with the help of God. And their dreams come true. Good for the cupbearer, who's restored to his position under Pharaoh's watch. Bad for the chief baker, who ends up being executed by the Pharaoh. But the dreams come true. A couple years later, Pharaoh wakes up one morning after having some very disturbing dreams. He knows these dreams mean something, so he calls in all his counselors, all his advisors, and people that should be able to interpret these dreams for him, but nobody can. He's at a loss. What am I going to do? The cupbearer says, oh, you know what? There was a dude in prison who told me my dreams and what they meant. Maybe he can help you out, Pharaoh. This is like 2 years later. So Pharaoh brings Joseph in. Now remember, Pharaoh, the most powerful man in all the world, brings this man Joseph, who seems to be nobody. He's this former dreamer who was a slave and now a prisoner. He brings him in, and the Bible tells us that God gives Joseph the interpretation for the dreams. I love Pharaoh's response in Genesis 41:38. So Pharaoh asked them, his advisors, can we find anyone like this man? One in whom is the Spirit of God? Can we find anybody like this? And so what we find is, in the midst of his disappointment, from dreamer to slave, now to prisoner, Joseph remains true to his identity. He remains true to his identity. We like to find identities in different things, our jobs and our family situations and all that kind of thing. But really, our identity is in Jesus Christ. He's our leader. He's the one we follow. If our identity is in Jesus Christ, wouldn't we remain true to that when times get rough? But here's the question. Where is your identity when life gets rough? Can people look at you and say, oh, he's got the Spirit of God? She's got the Spirit of God. in her. When you go through disappointments in life, how do people identify you? Think about that. Let me put it this way. Do they see a coward? Someone who runs away when things get rough? Do they see you as a complainer? Life gets rough and all you do is, I can't do that, and complain about it? Or do they see you as someone who cusses at the top of his lungs? Life gets rough and man, you just let him fly. Or are people seeing you like they saw Joseph? Someone who has the Spirit of God in you. Where's your identity? Joseph remains true to his identity in God, and that leads to Pharaoh putting Joseph in charge of his whole palace and all his people. Only Pharaoh would be the one who would be higher ranked than Joseph. And so from dreamer to slave to prisoner, Joseph rises to be the vice president in all of Egypt and pretty much the second most powerful man in the world. How awesome is that? How does that happen? How does that happen? That's what happens when God writes your story. Someone shared with me something very profound on my Facebook wall last week. I want to share this with you. It's a dialogue between man and God. And I thought this was really, really cool because sometimes we think life is rough and we don't understand why, but this kind of shows what happens, all right? So here it goes. The man asks God, God, can I ask you a question? God says, sure. Why did you let so much stuff happen to me today? God says, what do you mean? Man says, well, I woke up late. Yeah. My car took forever to start. Okay. At lunch, they made my sandwich wrong, and I had to wait. Mm-hmm. On the way home, my phone went dead just as I picked up a call. All right. And on top of it all, when I got home, I just wanted to soak my feet in my new foot massager and relax, but it wouldn't work. Nothing went right today. Why did you do that, God? Anybody ever feel like that? You have the worst day of your life and you're like, man, why did God do this? I love the response. God says, let me see. The death angel was at your bed this morning and I had to send one of my angels to battle him for your life. I let you sleep through that. I didn't let your car start because there was a drunk driver on the road that would have hit you if you were driving down that route. The first person who made your lunch today was sick, and I didn't want you to catch what he had. I knew you couldn't afford to miss work. Your phone went dead because the person that was calling you was going to give false witness. He was going to lie about you and what you said on that call. I didn't even let you talk to them so you would be covered. Oh, and that foot massager, it had a short in it that was going to knock out the power in your house tonight. I didn't think you wanted to be in the dark. Perspective. We go through life and we go through these bad days and we think, God, why are you doing this to me? Could it be that he's writing your story and looking out for you? Where's your identity? Are you letting God write your story? God uses Joseph now, in this moment in his life, to save millions of people from starvation, from this severe famine that would last 7 years. And the famine is so widespread that it affects the land of Canaan where Joseph's family is, his father and his brothers. And their food runs so low that finally Daddy Jacob says to the sons, hey, we need food, you better go to Egypt and get some. I hear they have it. Guess what happens when Joseph's brothers come to Egypt and when they see him? First of all, they don't recognize Joseph. It's been like 20-some years. They don't recognize him. And second, Genesis 42:6, here it is. They bowed down to him with their faces to the ground. Joseph's dreams came true. His dreams came true. But Joseph keeps his identity a secret. He doesn't let his brothers know who he is, and he puts them through these series of tests to kind of make him scared, and it works. It works. But he gets to the point where he can't stand this masquerade any longer, you know? He's got to let it out. I'm your brother. And he finally lets his brothers know who he is. And it's a great moment. He's out there crying. Everybody in the palace can hear it. You know, they're like, oh, what's up with Sissy Boy over there, you know? So he's crying. He finally lets it out. I'm your brother. And they have this great moment of reunion. And then in Genesis 45:5, Joseph tells his brothers something real important here. And he says this, and now, do not be distressed and do not be angry with yourselves for selling me here, because it was to save lives that God sent me ahead of you. Perspective. Then again in Genesis 50, in verse 20, Joseph says, this is the end. Jacob's gone, and this is the end of Genesis. He says to his brothers, you intended to harm me, but God intended it for good, to accomplish what is now being done, the saving of many lives. Perspective. Joseph could have sat and wallowed in his sorrow and complained about what he was going through and just cussed at the top of his lungs. He could have done all these other things and just wallowed in his sorrow, but no, here's what happened. In the midst of his disappointment, from dreamer to slave to prisoner and now to vice president, Joseph remains true to his calling. It wasn't about him being second in command in Egypt. It wasn't about him being ruler in Potiphar's house or leader in the prison or anything like that. It wasn't about any of that. It was about what God was doing through him to make things happen, the saving of many lives. God did not cause his brothers to sin by selling Joseph into slavery and by lying to their father about what happened to Joseph. God didn't cause Potiphar's wife to sin either by lusting after Joseph and then lying about the attack he supposedly made on her. But here's what God does. He doesn't cause any of that to happen. Here's what God does. He takes all of those decisions and all of those broken pieces and all of that bad stuff, and he accomplishes his purpose. That's what he does. This is the ultimate view of God's sovereignty. It's not to say that God causes all things. It's to say that God causes all things to work together for the good of those who love him and have been called according to his purpose. Romans 8:28. Man, we go through life and we say, why me? Why is this happening to me? What is God doing? Where are you, God? I don't understand. I'm so tired of life. I just want to give up. We go through life like that. There's no point. God uses all things in your life to accomplish his will and his purpose, because we've been called according to his purpose to do good things for him. Quit your complaining. Quit your arguing. Quit your whatever, backbiting and slandering and backstabbing in this church, and live for Jesus Christ. Because God is here. Here's what I want you to get today. Never give up on God redeeming your story. Never give up on that. God is the great Redeemer. He sees your life as whole and complete. In your life, guess what? It's never too broken. It's never too bruised. It's never too out of whack. It's never too busted. It's never too late, because God can fix it. He takes all these broken pieces and he puts them back together and he turns it into something beautiful, like he did with Joseph. That's the upper story that the Bible is telling us. All these broken pieces are ultimately leading to the great Redeemer, Jesus Christ, who redeemed us, bought us back from our sin. Joseph spent a long time in prison as a slave, but God never left him. Remember, God was with him. God was at work the whole time, and God is not going to leave you. God's never going to leave you. And you might not know it now, but like Joseph, you'll look back on your life and you'll see exactly what Joseph saw in his own life. God was at work to accomplish his purpose and his will in my life the whole time. We may not get to write our own adventure. We might not get to choose what we get to do and not do, or not go through these things that we don't like to go through. But we do get to choose how we respond when disappointment inevitably comes in life. So will you remain true to your faith, to your identity in God, and to your calling?